Mike and Emily, a young couple, decided to spend Christmas away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Mike came up with the idea of renting a room at an old mountain inn he had read about in a travel blog. The perfect place to enjoy the snow and peace, he assured her. They arrived late in the evening. The old inn looked majestic, but slightly eerie. Lights shone faintly through the curtains, and the tall pines surrounding the building seemed to guard it. Mr. Harper showed them to their room on the second floor. The centerpiece was a grand fireplace, adorned with intricate wooden carvings. On the mantelpiece sat an unusual angel figurine, so lifelike it seemed almost alive. "This is our family heirloom," Mrs. Harper said. "Every Christmas, the angel protects our home. Please don't touch it." Mike and Emily exchanged amused smiles, brushing it off as a local legend. Yet once alone in their room, they couldn't shake the feeling that the figurine was watching them. The first night was restless. Around 2 a.m., Emily woke up to a strange sound, like faint tapping. She shook Mike awake. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Mike got up, but found nothing. The noise stopped. The next morning, they mentioned the sound to Mr. Harper over breakfast. His demeanor turned cold as he replied, "The angel has its rules. You do well to follow them." Mike picked it up and placed it back, but for a moment, he thought its expression had changed. He dismissed it, thinking it was just the flickering firelight. "How did it get here?" Emily's voice quavered. They placed the angel back on the mantelpiece. But things only got worse. The lights in the room began to flicker. The footsteps now echoed inside the room. Emily tried to stay calm, but her nerves were fraying. She suggested they leave, but Mike decided to go downstairs to talk to the Harpers. As he reached the first floor, he noticed the door to the sitting room was closed. Muffled voices came from inside, as though the innkeepers were arguing. He leaned closer and heard fragments of their conversation. "They shouldn't have touched it. This is their mistake, not ours." When Mike returned to their room, he found Emily sitting on the bed, pale and trembling. "It moved," she whispered. "What moved?" "The angel. I saw it turn its head." Mike tried to reassure her, but then they both heard a knock at the window. They were on the second floor. It was impossible. Mike looked out and saw a shadow in the snow below, faint but unmistakably shaped like wings. He decided they couldn't stay any longer and began packing their things. As they tried to leave the room, the door wouldn't budge. The angel figurine now lay on the floor again, its face twisted into a grotesque snarl. Emily screamed as the room went pitch black. In the darkness, a whisper echoed, "You shouldn't have touched it." Somehow, they managed to force the door open and fled outside. They jumped into their car and drove away without looking back. At the nearest gas station, they stopped to catch their breath. Mike opened the trunk to check their bags, but there it was, the angel figurine, lying on top of their belongings. The story ends with the sound of shattering glass and a scream, leaving the audience in suspense with an open-ended finale. Christmas at Jacob's grandmother's house had always been a bit strange. The old house stood at the edge of a forest, far from neighbors and the sounds of civilization. Only the wind, the trees, and the creaking walls kept them company. Even though his grandmother had passed away years ago, the family still visited the house for the holidays. This time, Jakob's mother decided to clean the attic to find some vintage decorations for the tree. Jacob went up to the attic with her. Among the dusty boxes, they discovered a wooden chest with a lock. Inside were decorations, glass balls, miniature angels, and a strange wooden soldier. The soldier was unusual. Its eyes glowed as if alive, and its wide smile seemed unnervingly sinister, like it was hiding something frightening. Jacob took the soldier to his room. That night, he placed it on a shelf and went to sleep. But in the morning, he found the toy on his desk next to a notepad with crooked lines drawn across its pages. Jacob asked his parents if they had touched the toy, but they just laughed. "You probably forgot where you put it." That night, he put the soldier back on the shelf, but woke up to strange rustling sounds. Turning around, he saw the toy now sitting on the windowsill facing the forest. Jacob decided to hide the soldier. He placed it in a box and locked it in the closet. But the next morning, it was back on the windowsill, and outside in the snow were tiny footprints like those of a small human. His parents started noticing odd occurrences too. His mom heard someone whispering her name in the middle of the night. His dad found that the Christmas ornaments had disappeared from the tree and were stacked in a circle in another corner of the room. Jacob began having nightmares. In one, he was trapped in a dark room surrounded by shadows. In the center stood the soldier, its face now grotesquely twisted. "You must listen to me," it said in a deep voice. Jacob told his parents about his dreams. His father decided to throw the toy into the fireplace, but as they approached the fire, the soldier suddenly spoke. "You cannot get rid of me." The flames instantly extinguished and the house plunged into darkness. After a few moments of silence, they heard a scraping noise outside the window. Stepping outside, they saw a large handprint in the snow. That evening, the entire family gathered in one room, deciding to wait until morning and leave the house. But late at night, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a shadowy figure. Jacob rushed to slam the door shut, but the shadow didn't disappear. It began knocking, softly at first, then louder and louder. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the soldier was sitting on the table before them. Its eyes were now hollow, and its smile had grown wider. On the floor beside it was a message scrawled in ash. "This house is mine now." The family fled the house immediately, leaving all their belongings behind. They never returned. A month later, Jacob found a box of decorations in his room, though no one in the family had brought it home. Inside was the same wooden soldier. Rick was no stranger to loneliness, but on this Christmas Eve, something felt different. The dormitory was almost empty. Most students had gone home, leaving Rick behind with no money and solitude. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows as if trying to break into his tiny room. He sat curled up on his bed, staring at his phone. The evening lights from the window created a cold and muted glow. When the clock struck midnight, Rick glanced at his artificial Christmas tree in the corner. It was decorated with a few colorful ornaments. Not much of a festive sight, but at least it was some trace of Christmas. Suddenly, A faint knock came at the door. Rick blinked, thinking he imagined it. It was too quiet in the dorm, and even the light flickered strangely. He opened the door, his heart racing, but there was nothing there. Only a small red box, carefully placed on the floor. No card, no notes, just his name, written in black ink on the box. Rick stared at the box for a long time. It was a strange sight, especially in a place where there was no sign of Christmas cheer. The red wrapping seemed too new, too clean. His name, written in elegant handwriting, seemed to imprint itself in his mind. Then he noticed something odd. The lights continued to flash, but now they formed a specific pattern, slowly spelling out a word. Look. Rick froze, his breath quickening. The lights continued to blink, forming strange shapes, as though something, or someone, was trying to make him see something. And every time the word "look" appeared in his vision, Rick felt the air around him grow heavier. His phone suddenly buzzed, an SMS from a friend who had already gone home. Rick flinched, but quickly glanced back at the lights. They flickered faster, and now the word "run" appeared among the lights. Shocked, Rick pushed the lights aside and looked around the room. Panic was rising within him. His gaze fell on the door, which was slightly ajar. And again, as if nothing had happened, there was another box, slightly bigger, sitting in front of him. His stomach tightened with dread. He opened the second box. At the top was a photo taken on film. It showed his room just moments after he had sat down on the bed. But there was one odd detail. Barely visible in the corner of the window, someone's eyes were watching him from behind the curtain. Rick jerked back, his body tensing. He rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain, but outside there was nothing, only snow and a silent courtyard. He scanned the room, looked back at the photo, and his gaze froze on those eyes, the ones that weren't there in real life. He felt a coldness sweep over him. His breathing grew faster, and suddenly, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. Rick stood frozen, his nerves on edge. He couldn't stay in the room any longer, but then he noticed a third box had appeared before him. Unable to make sense of what was happening, he opened it. Inside was a small mirror in an antique frame. Engraved on the mirror were the words, "Last Chance." He held the mirror up to his face. Everything seemed normal in the reflection, but something was wrong. He noticed his movements had begun to slow, unnervingly. When he raised his hand, the reflection did so with a slight delay, and then the face in the mirror stretched into a grin. Rick recoiled. Suddenly, his reflection began to move independently of him. It was terrifying, as if it wasn't following his actions, but something else was in front of him. Before he could pull away, the mirror cracked. Cracks spread across the glass, and then it started to stretch as though trying to consume him. Before he could pull away, the mirror cracked. Cracks spread across the glass, and then it started to stretch as though trying to consume him. A week later, new students began moving into the dorm. They chatted happily, unpacked their things, and prepared for the holidays. But one of them, Alex, walked into his room and noticed something strange. 3 boxes were lying before the door, identical to the ones that had once arrived for Rick. On the boxes was written Alex's name. The student crouched and began to open them. He opened the first box and found the string of lights. They flickered in the same strange rhythm. As before, the lights formed the word "look." A chill ran down Alex's spine, and he felt his gaze involuntarily fixate on the boxes. Everything was repeating.